And I was wondering, so what was your role in the negotiations for the new democratic South Africa?
I think one must look at the two phases, really. The first phase was when we sat around the negotiating table, crafting the interim constitution, preparing for the general democratic elections in 94. Uh, that was a first phase. The second phase was the Constitutional Assembly drafting uh, the final constitution as we know it today. The first phase, I was part of the National Party team. I was playing from the bench, so to speak. I was at times a Mr. Fix It, uh, try and break this deadlock, try and break that deadlock. And I loved every moment with it, meeting people that I think it's a bit hard to say that were out of reach for us, but that in fact was what it was. How do I speak with a Joe Slovo who's heading Mkonto Wesizwe and me having different roles? And here we are sitting together trying to find solutions. So I wouldn't elevate myself to a higher level than saying, well, I was in then part of the National Party negotiating team here and there, acting as a Mr. Fix-It, trying to break deadlocks. After the general election, the democratic elections, uh, a constitutional assembly was formed and charged with the responsibility to write the constitution as we know it today. And much to my surprise, uh, I became the deputy chair of that assembly, and Cyril Ramaphosa, the president, became the chair. It it wasn't as if somebody sent out an advertisement and say, "Who wants to be the deputy chair? We want you to apply for it." It just happened on one day. They said, "Well, you will be nominated. Thabo Mbeki will now stand up and nominate you as the deputy chair of the Constitutional Assembly." And I realized that uh, Tabo would not have done that without consulting F.W. de Klerk and others. So much to my surprise, and that was the pinnacle of my career, so to speak. There I was working with Cyril. I was still not the chief negotiator for the National Party. Cyril had two hats. He was chair of the Constitutional Assembly and he was leading the ANC negotiating team. Rolf Meyer was leading the National Party negotiating team, of which I was a part, but I was also part of the inner circle with Cyril, ensuring that we would deliver a constitution on time.
And in your second role as the deputy chair, you're delivering what we now know as the final South African constitution. But the final South African constitution, and correct me if I'm wrong here, was based largely on the interim constitution that laid out a large number of principles around which the new South African constitution was based. Is that correct?
Yeah, 34 principles. There was a lot of arm wrestling taking place to get the constitution, the principles part of the interim constitution, and to ensure that the final constitution would be grounded in those 34 principles, and that the newly formed constitutional court would ensure that those principles found their way into the constitution.
And so, what were the most important inclusions you were pushing for in the negotiations when you were a Mr. Fix-It, and then when you were deputy chair of the Constitutional Assembly?
You know, it's so exciting just to think about it and think about those days. I wouldn't like to to cite one or two examples unless you put a pistol against my head. I would just like to set the scene and explain a little bit to you what happened. I remember one occasion when a group of six of us were asked to resolve a particular issue. Now, those negotiations went long into the night and they started early. So the six of us were tired, and we then realized that, we will have to resolve this. We are called upon to resolve this. And may I say at the outset, when you enter those little uh, inner negotiations within the negotiations, you do know and realize that failure is not an option. So the first thing we did on that particular occasion was to rearrange the chairs, not the one side sitting opposite to the other, but formed a little circle, because it was now the six of us against the rest of them. In other words, when we reported back to the general uh, negotiating teams, it we the six of us would be on the same side, and we would have to defend the position we came to. It was so exciting because the art of negotiation is really to listen what drives the person or the other side of the negotiating table. And so that ended up with the six of us presenting a united position, which was accepted. But there was another occasion, and I'll mention his name because I kindly mention his name here. Dalla Omer and I was charged to resolve some issues, and the two of us said, we just don't know what's wrong with these people. I mean, the two caucuses. What's wrong with these people? You and I are now sitting here. We're finding solutions. Let's go back and report our result. And in that particular meeting, Nelson Mandela and Cyril Ramaphosa was sitting there, and F.W. de Klerk and Rolf Meyer was sitting there, and we were smiling. We've got a solution. We've got a solution. When we presented the the outcome was not what we had hoped for. Uh, Mandela and Ramaphosa said, Omar, what have you been up to? What have you and Leon Wessels been smoking? What were you drinking? Kusato will never ever accept this compromised position. And the clerk and Rolf Meyer said, Wessels, you've been under the influence of Dalla Omar for much too long. The two of you must go back and rethink this whole position, because COSATU on the one hand and the employer associations will, on the other hand, will simply not accept that. So we had to withdraw, swallow our pride, and start all over again. And that was the exciting part of all of it. If you will allow me, I just want to mention one little example. There was a little fight in a plenary session, a bit, and I was leading the charge in this fight on behalf of the National Party, and Cyril was on the other side of it, and it was quite a forceful debate. So we meet in the corridors, and I said, Cyril, I don't like it when we speak like this with one another. We must resolve it. And he said, no, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. You were simply presenting your party's position, and there's nothing personal about it. I can go on, and it will take you a long time to listen to all these little stories, but I think at the heart of it is the art of listening and not ridiculing the arguments that you are forced to consider.